getting old, but I'm not old yet. I'm already worried that I might forget how to laugh, how to love, how to live, how to learn. I wanna die with a smile when it comes my turn.
Back in the 60s, Sing-Along Jubilee was a fixture on CBC television and a part of the Canadian lexicon. Gene MacLellan was on that show and later went on to become internationally famous as the writer of Snowbird and Put Your Hand in the Hand. In this episode of Grave Concerns, we're going to go and learn a lot more about Gene MacLellan.
I'm already worried that I might forget how to laugh, how to love, how to live, how to love. See the people where it comes just to pay their respect to a false sense of hope of the time that they had left.
Oh, hi, Fred.
Hey, kid.
How you doing, buddy?
Good. I can't hear you. Good, man.
Well, I was trying to hear you, you know.
Yeah. How you doing?
Not too bad.
I would love to spend a bit of time talking about Gene MacLellan with you. That's
Sure,
right.
man. No problem. I'd
Yeah,
love to.
Sing-Along Jubilee and all that.
Oh yeah, it goes way back. Let's go in the next room and do it.
Okay.
Here from the islands, from Bobcation, Ontario, and from parts unknown is Gene MacLellan, right here.
So he's a great songwriter. His economy of phrase and his melodic sensibility.
I don't even know if he ever wrote a bad song. Everything he wrote that I heard was all there. It was always there, and he had a way of doing it. He could play well. And even when he sang the songs himself, I remember hearing, "I'll be biding my time while the glow from the wine makes a fool of me."
Yeah.
I thought, whoa, that just was such great poetry, and so right to the. I just was a great songwriter. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you heard Snowbird played by Gene?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember I was at Jim Bennett's house, and Gene came in, and he said, "Hey, I just wrote this song. It's called Snowbird. You guys want to hear it?" And we said, "Sure." And he brought out this little Martin, and he played it. We both liked it very much, and you could tell that it was a great song. And he said to me, he says, "So you want to record it?" And I said, "What?" He said, "You want to record it?" I said, "Well, you know me, man. I got my own songs. I just do my own songs."
Beneath its snowy mantle, cold and clean, the unborn grass lies waiting for its coat to turn to green. The snowbird sings a song he always sings, that speaks to me of flowers that will bloom again in spring.
But there's another story. When I was in Hollywood, and my stay a while was climbing the charts, what song was racing me up the charts was "Put Your Hand in the Hand" by Ocean. We're going up the charts neck and neck, two Canadian songs with two Canadian artists going up the charts, and I'm going, oh man, I know Gene. And eventually the way it settled was, he got number one.
There's a different Eli, putting your hand in the hand of a man from Galilee.
Who could write a song and have it go on the pop charts that was a gospel song like that? He was truly true to himself. I mean, he became a spiritual person, and he released music that was, and wrote music that was really about himself, and didn't worry about it being a hit or not a hit, you know. And that's a really good thing. I respect him for that, you know.
In Snowbird, the total went to what? Some 70 people recorded it?
I don't know. It was over 50 anyway, I think.
Yeah. Tell me, how many of those recordings do you have in the house?
I think I have one by Chet Atkins.
Is that right?
Or in Ann Murray's too, but Chet Atkins recorded it, and he sent me down a copy of the single. I was really flattered.
That's quite a sight. When you think of a performer in a captive audience, it normally doesn't conjure up a vision like this. For Gene MacLellan, though, it became far more important to reach the prisoners behind these walls than it was to play at sold-out shows at Massey Hall. Gene was an intensely spiritual man who was compelled to use his music for God, helping the hopeless and lost try to regain their lives.
I never found contentment until I fell at the shepherd's feet. And now I'm singing in that.
Prisons are a disturbing place to spend time, even as a volunteer. The feeling standing outside the walls is palpable, and it made me curious about Gene's work. I headed to Fredericton to meet Monty Lewis, former inmate who did prison outreach with Gene, and he continues to work with inmates and their families today.
Hey, hello.
Monty.
Yeah.
Brent Mason.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How
Great.
you doing?
Good to see you.
This is Bridges, eh?
This is Victory Center, yeah, Bridges of Canada.
Gorgeous building.
It's lovely.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Gene was instrumental in helping me start this ministry 30 years ago in Napanee, Ontario.
And I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to come into the yard here today.
And then Gene, at the height of Gene's career, joined me, and he said he believed God sent him to help me do what I was doing with these young people.
Hand in the hand of the man from Galilee.
And so for over 12 years, Gene and I off and on traveled together all over different parts of Canada.
Can you talk a bit about maybe an example of somebody who Gene specifically might have affected and been involved with? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I could talk about many, but one really in particular would be Harold Shea. And Gene was visiting Dorchester, and he had known Harold from the time Harold was a young boy on PEI. And Harold was back in prison again, you know, another 5 or 10 years. Harold was doing life on the installment plan with no hope and no purpose, and he had no drive really. And when Gene was leaving, in the crowd, he looked at Harold, and these words, he said, "Jesus loves you, Harold." And of course had to leave because the time was up, and Harold Shea went back to his cell. He couldn't get those words out of his mind. The love of God that was manifest through Gene MacLellan, and looking Harold in the eyes and telling him that Jesus loved him, completely turned Harold's life around, changed his life. He became a walking miracle and adopted a little boy, named him after Gene, and just became a wonderful father, a wonderful husband, and a bonus to the nation of Canada, you know, from Gene's visit to prison. And that's just one of many.
Every time I look into the holy book, I want to tremble.
This whole place here, the treatment center, everything, and the ministry we do all over the world is a testimony to a man of the caliber and quality and the heart and compassion of Gene MacLellan. Become a very dear friend, and his commitment to God's work and to what he's seen us doing with the hungry and the poor and the widows and the orphans, and he was part of that, a big part of it. He's still part of it.
Now we're off to meet Ron Hines. Ron is the man of 1,000 songs, including the often covered classic Sonny's Dream. Gene MacLellan was one of this legend's heroes.
Gene was arguably probably the most successful, financially successful songwriter to ever come out of maritime Canada. And I mean, even Elvis covered Snowbird, for God's sake. And there was, we flirted with this idea of a co-write at a certain point, that we would try and get together and co-write a song. And I was in St. John's, and I got a call that night to say that it looks like you're never going to be able to write with Gene MacLellan now. Sometime later, I was at a meeting of the Songwriters Association of Canada, and I wanted to say something about him. Of course, when I stood up, my heart just sank with it, and I blanked on everything that I wanted to say. And I said, you know, I'd really like to say something about Gene MacLellan. So, Godspeed was the only thing that fell out, and that was it. And I sat down and I wrote the word down, just on the slip of paper. And the meeting went on, and I kind of blanked from the meeting. And Godspeed naturally went to God bless, and that naturally went to God damn, and. I excused myself from the meeting, and I went upstairs, picked the guitar up, and sat on the bottom of the bed and just sang the song. And a little part of me afterwards thought, you know, I think he was there with me. I think he was kind of sitting on my shoulder, and that was our co-write. Godspeed, Godspeed, and forgive a sweet soul a desperate deed. His was a prison and he was freed. Godspeed. God bless. God bless. Was born out of sorrow or out of distress. Speculation is anyone's guess. God bless. God bless. And God only knows what takes the petal from the rose, what makes the dark rivers overflow, and a lifetime come and go. Must be God's will or God's plan. But you put your hand in the hand of the man. You must have believed he would understand and forgive a sweet soul a desperate deed. Godspeed. Godspeed. Oh, God only knows what takes the petal from the rose, what makes the dark rivers overflow, what makes a lifetime come and go. But goddamn, goddamn, you put your hand in the hand of the man. You must have believed he would understand and forgive a sweet soul a desperate deed. Godspeed. 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 Godspeed, Gene MacLellan.
Well, the spotlight became a little too bright for Gene. He eventually ended up good and far from it in PEI, where he'd summered as a kid. Toronto's a far cry from a Tuesday night in North Rustico, and Gene was right at home trying out new tunes at this speakeasy. Listen close. You can still hear him.
Come on in, bud. How are you?
How you doing, Brent Mason?
Oh, gosh, pleased to meet you. We're waiting for you here, bud.
I hear this is the spot to come on a Tuesday night in Rustico, North Rustico.
It's the only spot to come in North Rustico on Tuesday night. I'll tell you, man, we got some wicked music going on in here. And actually, we got some good music at Gene MacLellan's in here. Grab your guitar, come on in. I'll show you, and you can witness it.
That sounds great to me. Thanks.
Oh, playing pretty good.
Gene must have felt at home here, eh?
Gene felt very comfortable here,
just this feels
when he first got going, Gene was coming down here saying, "Dave, what do you think of this little tune?" And we play it, and then the next day come in, well, I changed it to this, and then the next day come in, well, try me with this, and then the next day come in, well, we'll put this one on the back burner.
There must have been some real gems, though, eh?
Oh, it was like those magic moments.
I'd spend my life trying to please you.
And here's a guy from Prince Edward Island, wrote songs that the world loved, inspired by the supportive nature of life in a tiny community, where he saw love and he saw compassion, and and he saw sorrow, and he had heartbreak, and the guy, was drawn to writing about this and to expressing this on behalf of those people who couldn't do it.
Lost in her world so far away. A moment ago could be a lifetime if you know. I know. She's leaving and there's nothing you can say. As hard as I try, I can't reach you.
I can say one thing about Gene. He was the one guy when I first heard those songs that my life just turned on a dime.
They're away, and it looks like our love.
I would say Gene saw music as a miracle. right? Okay, it was a miracle he was always looking for, and yet he had it.
Oh, man, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And the music lives on.
Gene had huge artistic success, and he got a lot of purpose and joy from helping people in the prisons get back to it. But nothing made him happier than being at home, raising a family and writing his songs.
Good day, how are you?
Hey, how are you, Judy?
Come on in.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Come on in.
Shelter from the storm here or what?
Yeah, coffee's ready. Would you like some?
Love a cup.
Oh, great.
Love a cup, thanks.
Sure. Okay, coffee. In 1971, I was dating another musician, and he introduced me to Gene.
Classic story.
Classic story. He's biding his time. Gene was basically backing down and away from all the spotlight when we got together. It wasn't him. It never was him. He just wanted to stay home and write.
There's a good photo there.
That's a good photo of Gene, yeah. And he did. He wrote all night long. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and he'd be downstairs writing something new, working something out. There was always music in the house. We just lived a very quiet life. What mattered was the kids and writing.
To you, who was Gene MacLellan?
It's a really tough question. Gene MacLellan, to me, was a very simple, talented man who loved his family, his God, and who cared about what was happening in the world around him, immediately around him. He was special. Yeah. It was just very special. We miss him.
What's it feel like to see Catherine on the stage?
I just went, wow. It was overwhelming for me that she would have the same kind of presence that her dad did.
Soon we'll hear those church bells ring. We'll ask all our friends to sing.
Gene always knew that one of his daughters was going to be a singer.
We exchange those rings.
She sings, she writes, I'm a proud mama.
Into a brand new world we will be entering.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Nice spot. What was it like growing up having your dad around working on music and writing songs? Do you have any memories of that?
I remember late nights sitting around the kitchen table just writing or singing, or in the afternoons just sitting on the couch writing or editing songs or working on various things, and that just seemed like a normal thing to do, and it is for me too, which is pretty lucky.
Do you remember when you decided to become a musician?
I guess I started writing when I was probably 14. It was right around just after my dad passed away. I kind of locked myself in my bedroom and just played guitar for a few years. That's what it seemed like anyway. And I guess at that point is when I really started expressing myself through songs, because I always found it a little hard to communicate how I was feeling, and especially talking about something as big as losing my dad. My dad had the best sense of humor. That's probably one of the things I remember most. He was, I think in the public he was pretty quiet, but my dad and I used to go for drives to Charlottetown or wherever, and we just talk the whole way and have ideas about different things and brainstorm, and he'd always be really open to the things that I was excited about, and he was just, a lovely dad.
All those books they left with me now lay scattered amongst these rooms.
marked with pen are the passages then that you felt spoke the truth. I could use you now to guide me somehow, or to walk me down that aisle. But I will not be the first you will miss giving birth. This was your 7th grandchild. It's been a long time. It's been a long time.
This is Mount Albion's cemetery, and we're at the final resting place of Gene MacLellan. It's definitely a snowbird, isn't it? It's a great quote here, "And the God of peace shall be with you." Seems like the right kind of words for Gene, given what we've heard through the course of the show, what a humble and gentle and compassionate person he was. It's a very unpretentious gravestone here beneath the snowy mantle, I guess. All right, it's time to get back on the road. We'll see you next week on Grave Concerns.
At the funeral parlor on a Monday night, a crowd had gathered to see the sight of a man in a casket made of satin and lace, with rouge on his cheeks and sleep on his face. The funeral director had done a good job. The brass was polished on every doorknob. Candles and the mirrors that hung around the room lit up the corners and chased back the gloom. Death is